What stood out in my mind, there's sort of a bunch of impressions. Number one, if I may be blunt about it, the sense of self-congratulation in the room is really high right now. The kind way to go about that is to probably say that, it's an eye-opening experience for someone from, and primarily an East Coast media head to come out here and, see all this. And the emphasis is less on sort of content than delivery, platform sharing, but the actual invention, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more energy here than there is on the East Coast right now. There's also a lot more happiness here than there is on the East Coast. That stood out for me. We heard Rupert Murdoch in a kind of a slightly less formal setting than he normally talks in, and he spoke about going after the New York Times in unusually blunt terms, where he said it would be nice to kill it, which I don't think he would say in a crowd of analysts or in like sort of a more structured setting. That was interesting. That MySpace is opening up its platform, is obviously very interesting. We'll see what will happen. I'm on MySpace. I happen to like MySpace. But I think we all know that its interface is really kind of hideous. And we'll see if this changes that, or makes it a little less of an eye-gouging experience, eye-gouging to someone at the advanced stage that I'm at, I should say. And in terms of like the sort of smaller moments you get, I found it very interesting that Brian McAndrews of Microsoft, and initially CEO of Aquantive, said that he basically felt that search, the value of search advertising, if anything, is overrated. That like a lot of attention, a lot of credit is given to the last transaction, the person clicking on, and no one's really paying attention to the TV ad that might have led that person there in the first place. I found that very interesting. I found that very interesting given what Steve Ballmer had said earlier about how important search remains to them, and search still is. But I just found that an interesting, just little aside. Like conferences like these, where essentially the new world is being invented as, we're in it. They're a really interesting reality check because, there's a lot of things that are coming online and that are real in ways that would have been inconceivable 5 years ago. Pre-Friendster, I don't know if I would have understood what something like Facebook could be and why it would be so compelling. I don't think it could have been explained to me. I don't think it could have been shown to me. You need the millions of people like feeding it stuff to make it real, which is exactly what's happening with that and MySpace and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, there's sort of an important reality check you have to put on all this. This is where the future is being invented, blah, 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 blah. But, as we've seen in the past, and not just in the last dot-com blow-up, the future is often pretty far ahead of what the average American consumer is going to want to deal with. I've just observing how people here interact with media and how few people read a newspaper in the morning. But this is a country where 25 million people still watch the network evening news, which is a ritual that I think was quaint and dated 15 years ago. There's still a lot of people who do that. There's an awful lot of big name websites that would kill to have 25 million people. Now, I'm not saying that the network news is good because it's awful. I'm not saying that it's compelling because it isn't. But I'm saying that the stuff that this crowd, in all of its wisdom and, wealth and, incredible high order intelligence and level of invention, because I can't stand the word innovation, I'll say invention. It's still far ahead of everything else, and you got to kind of, keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that we think is really cool may not be really cool to the rest of the world. Well, all right. I work for a traditional media company. I write for Business Week. Business Week is primarily, not exclusively, but it's primarily a print magazine. We get a significant amount of revenues from our digital offerings. And when I say significant, I mean significantly above 10%, which is pretty high for a magazine. That said, it's obvious what the bread and butter of the business is. The move to web and digital forms of content consumption of all forms has not been kind to brands like Business Week, which for a period of about 15 or 20 years from the early 80s till around 2000 was just making money hand over fist over hand over fist. That's changed. Like everyone else in the space of what we do, it's been challenged. In 2000, 2001, you didn't have any one of 15 to 20 websites that are significant, that are competing for the same eyeballs. You didn't have a lot of really good niche players, from paid content to TechCrunch to, you know, blah 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 blah, the names that we all know. Those didn't exist, or they were just, you know, they just didn't matter. They were non-material. You know, like every other, you know, major trusted print brand, Business Week is trying to figure out the way to transition to whatever the future is. And to me, the future lies somewhere between what you know, an old media line of thinking thinks the future will be, versus what, you know, the really forward-thinking minds here think it's going to be. Because the future doesn't arrive all at once. The future kind of arrives in dribs and drabs. And the future that happens in the Valley, that happens in New York City, that happens in Los Angeles, you know, it tends to wash out. It doesn't wash out as like one even tide. I mean, there's sort of just like splotches here and there. And, you know, we're just going to have to see how that all plays out. Well, I mean, I'm old school, email, you know. You know, the web content offerings that I'm unduly dependent on, whether it's something like Kaus Files, whether it's, you know, the media newsfeed from Media Bistro. Full disclosure, my wife runs Media Bistro. I am not sure that I can't live without Facebook, but I'm pretty new to Facebook. I'm not new to social networking, but I'm new to Facebook. I am, in my alternate life, I'm a musician. If I'm in an active band, I can't live without MySpace, probably. I'm not in an active band right now. I go to MySpace less frequently. So I'm not sure. I mean, I love Facebook. I love that it's a new way to interact with. It's a new way to be performative and witty with your friends, basically. It's a new way to stay in touch with your friends. I find that really fun. I'm not sure it's hit the point of stuff that I absolutely can't live without. But again, I mean, I'm sure by the purposes of the Web 2.0 conference, I'm extraordinarily old school. If I can't find a physical copy of the New York Times in the morning, I get like really freaking anxious. I mean, like, I really don't like that. I need that thing in my hands. And online, to me, is not the same experience. Now, that may have something to do with how the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal conceive themselves online right now, or it might have to do with the fact that, you know, I essentially am toting around a oldish, you know, set of media assumptions.